Welcome to Karen and welcome to David. Thanks for joining us. And all the regulars. Uh, a new mini course, a new yet old field of looking at women in our literature. And lest you say, but the New Testament is not our literature, well, one could debate it because, especially in the early generations, these were Jews who were creating this literature. And while we have the New Testament from a period far beyond or beyond the time when it was self-identified Jews were organizing things. That's not true. You know what? It's a little bit blurry. It used to be that people would say there was a time when Christianity split off from Judaism. But as far as I can tell in scholarship today, that's not the most up-to-date view. Um, there was a time, maybe it was 100 years, maybe it was 200 years, where it was very, very blurry, very fuzzy, the difference between Judaism and Christianity. There were Jews that believed in Jesus as Messiah, Jesus as Son of God, but didn't break away from Judaism. And anybody who has read through the Acts of the Apostles know that it was a slow process during Paul's time to expand the religion from the epicenter in Jerusalem to to the diaspora. So this is interesting stuff. I am still a novice. Please don't understand the fact that that I'm doing this at all is at the request of Rabbi Marsha, who knows that I've been studying and teaching, co-teaching New Testament texts over the last 5, 6 years, mostly with now a friend, colleague, Reverend Dr. Stephen Kinney, who lives uh, in Fredericksburg, Hill Country, Texas. And I know him for many years through a cousin of mine. Um, and we began teaching, I think, even during the pandemic. So we've been at it for a while, alternating between New Testament texts, and we did some biblical texts. For one summer, we did Talmud, and now we're doing the book of Tobit, as I mentioned to the group when we were doing the women of Tobit. Um, and so please don't accept anything I say as authoritative here on New Testament studies. As I say, I'm still a novice, but it shouldn't stop us from looking at this. And here's if you're not used to reading the Gospels or other New Testament texts, we're gonna stay mostly in the Gospels for today and next week. Um, just try to keep an open mind. In other words, um, read it with the understanding that you're going to need to read it, and you will be reading it many other times in the future if you want to really get the message and involved. Now, I do have kind of a rule that when we go deep into these texts, it is better if there is a Christian scholar or learner on hand to give their own impression, especially when it comes to difficult texts and what those texts might mean to us. The texts today are not of the difficult kind when it comes to Jewish-Christian relationships. A little bit, but not really. Not the difficult texts like the Passion narrative or the text in Revelation that uses the term synagogue of Satan, synagogues of Satan. There are some very difficult texts, and those are important for us to study together with Christians and to exchange our views. Um, you will see a lot of hints and reflections of Hebrew, of TaNaKh texts. That is intentional on behalf of the writers. The question, of course, is do you see them as fulfillment of biblical text, as many Christians do, or do you see them as utilizing earlier Hebrew biblical texts in order to be part of that conversation? Now, I know people usually jump and say, in order to get us to missionize, in order to convince us, and maybe there's some of that in different places, but first and foremost, from a literary point of view, I think it's in order to be part of the conversation. They wanted these texts here are an attempt to speak Jewish to Jewish people. That's at least my view. That's the way. That's how I'm going about this, and I'm affected by various scholars. If any of you, or we're going to do this for 3 or 4 times. I have jury duty coming up. The question is whether I get taken or not. But at some point, not now, I'm happy to talk about how I go about what's my methodology. What are the books that I use, books like this. This is not great, but this is an easy one. And if you're going to buy just one book on the topic, this is a good one to have. Um, uh, Unless you don't think it's an important topic. But of course, if you're here today, you think it's an important topic, right? Okay. All right then. Any questions or comments before we begin? Or I'm sorry, even summing up kind of what we did over the last 6 weeks beforehand with the women of the Apocrypha. Okay then. Yeah, Ria, did you want to say something?
Yeah, that the women that we studied and looked at the stories about them were the whole thing did not evoke sympathy from me as a reader,
Sympathy,
and
sympathy
sympathy
to the
for
women or to the authors?
to the women, and because it was so lopsided, and it could be my 21st century mind. Or did the readers at that time, in the beginning of reading this and taking it seriously, uh, do you have any commentaries about um, what we read, and so you can get some kind of a sense of what they felt about it? Do I
So
make myself clear?
it's just like if it was biblical text, will we look and see what one of the rabbis wrote in the second century?
Well, or even yes, because that's the only thing that we have available from that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't have a body of midrash that I know of that relates that expands upon that text as it is biblical. That's a really interesting, really good question. I'd never thought of it that way before. Um,
yeah. That would be an historian's look at
yeah,
it.
and we
Yeah.
would be looking in Alexandria, Egypt, right? We'd be looking at Greek texts that might be commentaries, but I don't even know. An interesting question is, for what point do commentaries develop on earlier texts, as opposed to the text itself being reshaped? Not that you can't reshape a text afterwards, but at some point, though, we in the Jewish tradition, we got used to commentaries. And it begins in rabbinic literature with the midrashim of the Tanaim, midrashay Tanaim, like Mechilta and Sifra, which are the earliest forms around the time, reflecting the traditions from the time of the Mishnah, from the first 2 centuries of the Common Era. And they're organized according to the order of the text of the Torah, right? We don't get some of these other midrashim until a few centuries later. And we don't get commentaries per se until the Middle Ages, until, let's say, Sadia Gaon. I think that's ninth century. So towards the end of the first millennium, beginning of the second, there's a midrash, an interesting midrash called Midrash Mishlei, which I don't know enough about, and I kind of set out to learn more about it as we studied Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, on Wednesdays. The group, some of you were in that group, and so I regret not, it's a tension between finishing the biblical text or going deep into a particular midrash. This midrash has been pointed out by some to be kind of um, um, uh, a milestone of sort. Is kind of at the end of the midrashic period and the beginning of a commentary, play-by-play commentary. But I don't know. Anyway, so I don't think so. The earliest Jewish commentaries we'd have on the apocryphal literature would be in the late 19th century. I think when the study of Judaism, and of course that's not modern what you're looking for. That's not. Um, but let me ask you this way, Ria. I mean, the idea that a woman would become an assassin in such a successful way, and at the same time to keep her high degree of piety. I know that that's not what you're looking for in life.
No, no, but any of this, so that I don't know how literate people were at that time when these things were first written. So was it available to what population was it available? And then What was it? What was the feeling of somebody reading it as this is ridiculous? This would never happen, or yes, I know of these that what was what's going on in their community, and they can see certain reactions of women, and what we think women's role was maybe wasn't the way the way we think, and from what we read, and it's complicated.
Okay. So the first step in all of this complication is to look at the material. We agree on
Right?
that, right? First of all, we
Yes.
have to become literate before we can jump to the graduate level seminar on women's critique of whatever it might be, right? We've got to become literate. And that's one of the challenges with a lot of this stuff that very often things get in our way of becoming literate because I don't want to deal with that. I don't like what I hear. The common comment in Bible study groups is, I have a problem with this, right?
Uh,
People will say. So that's a very my ask is that we open ourselves. Let's let's come and meet the text where the text is given. It's the text is the way I'm presenting it to you with a particular translation and my own comments, but still, let's become literate, and that's a great segue for this. Even though there might be some things here that bother us because we as I don't know if we're all, I don't know, Karen and David, what your backgrounds are, but and Corrine, I know a little bit about your background, but the rest of us were well, Megan, also you came up. I mean, people, there's a varied background here, but many of us who grew up in the Jewish tradition, we have an aversion to New Testament texts.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, it's kind of deep grain, and so let's see where this takes us. We're going to cover two kind of stories that overlap today. I'm going to ask that we kind of skip. We don't take the second story seriously because we're going to come back to that in next week or the week after. But let's take a look now at um, at the story of the mother of John. Now, this is John the Baptist, not the same as the Gospel according to John. John the Baptist, his name in Hebrew, anybody? What is John in Hebrew?
Jonathan?
Almost, Yochanan. Yochanan. So the difference, Yonatan would be God gave, and Yochanan, Yehochanan, is God will be merciful, or God will have mercy. Hanan. God will, yeah, compassion. Okay. So, James, you want to start us off on this is from almost the beginning of the book of the Gospel according to Luke.
Okay. In the days of King Herod of Judah, there was a priest named Zachariah who belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. His wife was descended from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations of the Lord. But they had no children because Elizabeth was barren and both were getting on in years. Once, when she was serving as priest before God's during his section turn of duty, he was chosen by Lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the sanctuary of the Lord to offer incense. Now, at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of people was praying outside. Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zacharias saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zachariah, for your prayers have been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must never drink wine or strong drink. Even before birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit. He will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. With the spirit and power of Elijah, he will go before him to turn the heads of the parents to their children, and this obedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make many a people prepared for the Lord. Zacharias said to the angel, how can I know that this will happen? For I am an old man, and my wife is getting on in years. The angel replied, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe in my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak until the day these things occur.
Okay, let's take a break now. Initial reactions, folks. Assuming that this is new for most people, I'm guessing, right? Yeah.
There sounds like parts from other stories here, like a little bit like Abraham and Sarah, a little bit like the birth of Samuel. Uh, so yeah, I that kind of caught me. I saw.
Excellent. So if we're talking about uh, echoes, echoes of earlier biblical literature, of Hebrew biblical literature, um, I think there's at least, I think I found at least five here. There's probably more. The first thing is that she's like many women of biblical superheroes, right? She's barren. And as I've shared with you before, I know I've shared it with you because I share it with almost every group. As my good friend and teacher, Yair Zakovich, Professor Yair Zakovich used to say, if you want to be famous in the Hebrew Bible, make sure your mother was barren before you were born. And that's how this. So she's part of the biblical tradition. So this part focuses on Elizabeth. By the way, the name Elizabeth in Hebrew, anybody? Elisheva. Elisheva is Aaron's wife. Elisheva of Torah Aaron, right? Moses' brother, Moses' sister-in-law. Okay. And so very, very biblical names here, very, very Torah names. They're both part of the house of the Kohanim, so which means that at least they're thought to be an elevated stature, an elevated caste. I know we don't like to use that word with our own tradition, but that's what it is. That's what it was. Okay, so she's barren, getting on years, very much not just like Sarah, but like Hannah and like um, Rivka before she gives to the two sons, and Rachel, and I mean, who else do we have? Ruth in a way is barren because she's not with a man. There's variations of that. Anyway, okay, so she's in that tradition. Um, the story of the angel of the Lord. So you rightly felt, James, that there was some echoes of the birth of Samuel here, and there will be going forward as well. But this one is particular. The way this is spelled out here is actually reminiscent of another pre-birth story. Anybody?
Well, Isaac also with the angels.
Yeah, fair. So the angel. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. The angels, Gabriel here, three angels there. Yes, Megan.
Samson?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very, very similar to that whole story there, and that mysterious man that they meet. Um, another reference here is to Elijah, and so there's the stories of Elijah in the end of 1 Kings, beginning of 2 Kings, but there's a reference to Elijah in the end of the book of Malachi. And in that reference, it's exact. That text is quoted here. V'heshiv lev avot al banim v'lev banim al avotam. It's the Haftarah of Shabbat Hagadol for those of you that know. It's a kind of a very it's this idea that Elijah will be a harbinger of the messianic times, and in that time he will cause children to come closer to their parents, parents closer to their children.
Hmm.
So that's in Malachi, the end of chapter of the end of the book, at the end of the third chapter. And one more here is not one more, but it's the same as I am an old man and my wife is getting on in years. That's a direct quote from Abraham, right?
Well, also, isn't it uh, uh, from Jacob when he stands in front of Pharaoh? Like he talks
Mhm.
about being an old man.
Yeah, the difference is that Jacob has sons,
Right.
right? And this is part. Okay, so all this, so you can feel that this literature is steeped in the TaNaKh, right? I was studying this once, I don't know, last year with somebody who wasn't used to our group and came in one time. Said, "Well, they're just doing that to get Jews to believe it, right?" That's oversimplifying. That's how it's used afterwards, perhaps, but that's an oversimplification. Um,
Also, the last part where he says that you don't believe in my words. It sounds a little bit like when Moses strikes
right?
the water and he gets punished for it,
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of
Interesting. But why the punishment of being mute? I'm not sure. It's going to come up in the story later on, so it's an important feature of the development of the plot. That's sometimes that's what it's for as well, right? Um, and then what other text that we're not necessarily aware of is this drawing from? One of the lessons from the apocryphal literature and the connections between the apocryphal literature and the New Testament is that often you find a New Testament verse or passage draws its inspiration from one of the apocryphal books, and which, if we don't study that, we wouldn't know that that's part of Jewish literature. That's also the same phenomena as drawing directly from the TaNaKh, as we see. Okay. Anything else on this section before we go on? Okay, Susan, would you like to read today? We're at verse 24, everybody.
Yes. After those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she remained in seclusion. She said, "This is what the Lord has done for me in this time, when he looked favorably on me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people." In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and he came to her and said, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom there will be no end." Mary said to the angel, "How can this be, since I am a virgin?" The angel said to her, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be holy, and he will be called Son of God. And now your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has conceived a son, and this is the 6th month for her who was said to be barren. For nothing will be impossible with God." Then Mary said, "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." Then the angel departed from her.
Okay, let's take a break here. Any, anything reminiscent of A little bit similar here. This is not the story that I want to focus on today. We'll come back to it, of course, and we'll deal with this virgin birth and this promise of virgin birth. But one thing is that the angels are in direct contact, speaking back and forth to the characters. Did you notice that both in
Yeah.
all these in both these sections? And that's not something which is from the early biblical literature so much. The biblical the angelic figures in the TaNaKh are, an earlier part of the TaNaKh, are more they're more distant. They're put off. So, for instance, in the story you mentioned, James, of the angels that come to visit Avram and Sarai, that maybe it's Avram and Sarai. I don't remember if it's before or after the name change. They At the first we think that they're men, right? And it's only after we see it's God's presence. So there's a distance there. Other angels that in the wilderness, there's a presence of an angel which is not a personal angel. Is the story of Samson, his parents. It's a mysterious man, and then it becomes evident to them that he's an angel. But it's not a named angel speaking directly. Other examples of angels, David after the census. There's a few, but they're not. It's not. When do we have this particular a named angel speaking? Anybody? When do we first meet angels with names that are speaking to biblical characters? It's something we did. A hint. Something some of us did together about 6 years ago. It's Daniel in the book of
Daniel.
Daniel. Yeah,
Yeah.
the book of Daniel. Yeah. There you have angels speaking to Daniel. So that's a later development in angelology, and there's a whole Torah of angelology that I'm not an expert in. Um, uh, okay. Um, so I want to set aside Mary for now, other than she's being brought in to compare. We're meant to contrast these two women, Elizabeth on one side, Mary on the other side, the younger. Um, What do we learn from a woman's point of view, Ria? I'm going to ask you that question specifically, but anybody can answer it. What, from a woman's point of view? Yeah.
Um, that that Mary is young, engaged. I'm imagining a teenager actually,
Mhm.
and um, to keep her in the realm of purity. And then Elizabeth, though, being a married woman, I mean, this is the viewpoint uh, that she's viewed it within the context of marriage, and that the both of them, which is the first time that I've heard about where her husband and she could not conceive. Is that correct?
It's hard to know here. Yeah, that's a linguistic that we'd have to delve into the language here to see when it says that she's barren, that's blaming her. But when he admits that we're both old, that kind of sounds like, and Abraham also kind of admits that. But yeah, you are right. Usually the blame is put on the woman, of course, right? In the man's war. Yeah, I don't. I would have to
But
look.
there's a need to keep the mother of this whoever's going to be born in within a purity state.
Hmm. Okay, got it. Good. Um, any other comments before we move on? So we're going to do the next one. We may skip over the one after the poem, the prayer afterwards, but let's at least do this part, because really our topic is Elizabeth. The topic today began as the women in the life of John the Baptizer, and once upon a called Baptist. Lately, I see that in all the literature it's John the Baptizer, um, and and of course in my preparation. Galashti, it spilled over into Mary because that's the consecutive passage here. I wanted you to get a flavor for the. Well, by the way, if anybody really wants to get it, just pick up a Bible or look online and read through it for literacy's sake. Anyway, let's go to 39 now. Yes, Eileen.
Well, I just found it interesting that Mary, she didn't question the angel,
Hmm.
whereas the husband, Zechariah, questioned the angel.
Right. So maybe there's something to see there in the feminist way. In other words, the woman knows. Although Sarah questions the angels, she laughs, or she questions God, God's self. But in this case, the way it's here is that the women are accepting of this, and it's the man. In the second state, there's no man present that we meet. We don't meet a man here. Is the opposition? Yeah. So maybe this way of lifting up character of women. Let's find out. Eileen, why don't you continue 39?
In those days, Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leaped into her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? For as soon as I hear the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leaped for joy, and blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord."
Hey, so this is more of a woman's this now we're in a woman's world, right? We feel like this. This is women talking amongst themselves. We men are privy to this very intimate conversation. The situation is reminiscent. Any ring a bell? Anybody? The situation itself? I see here an echo, but an echo with an opposite effect, an echo of Rivka, Vahi Tomim Bevitna, and behold, there were twins in her womb, and Vihi Trotetsu Habanim Bikirba, and they were running around in her stomach. Literally, they were running around in her belly, and this is the opposite of that. Instead of this commotion that she felt of the two that would compete. No, there's a oneness here, and there's a leaping of joy because this baby that will be born will himself be the Elijah, the harbinger of the Messiah, right? Of the word, of the good word. So yeah, anything else on this section?
Well, Rabbi, I watched The Chosen. I don't know if you watched that
Oh, I
TV.
did. Should I? Is it worthwhile?
It is. And actually, I think what was unique, I was want to get your they really do a good job about Jews. I think is one of the best portrayal of ancient Jews and how they think and how much how Jewish Jesus was in the whole group. Uh, but it is worth watching. And I remember when they talked about the Elizabeth and Mary, they actually didn't go into the story at birth, but then they later on in the series they did flashbacks
Mm,
of them of this scene. But yeah, it's worth watching. I
okay.
think,
Okay.
especially from a
Thank you.
Jewish point of view,
Thank you.
it's really unique.
Yeah. Okay.
But the two women I noticed, and they were very, very close.
Mm,
Mary and Elizabeth, they were portrayed.
yeah. So we have this glimpse of to me it's just an intimacy that we men get to experience here. Ria.
That while he was mentioning about the film, there was a series of lectures on my Jewish learning about Jesus the Jew, and the teacher or the lecturer went through the Gospels in looking at the view and the development of the concepts of the relationship between Jews and the followers of Jesus, who form then a separate community.
Yeah.
But in that period of time, and it's really good if you can get the what do you call it, recordings. And anyway, that's I just wanted to
Thank you.
put in that plug.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a topic that used to be considered to be controversial, right? I giggle every time I hear when somebody says, Jesus was a Jew. Oh, really? You don't say. I mean, the whole thing is Yeah, and yes, you do find some levels and some groups within Christianity that have an issue with that and seeing it that way. Others that seem, yeah, yeah. We should leave some of this. So we're still at the first level of our study together. First level, we should maybe put these, put it on the board, write it on the whiteboard, as you the two of you just didn't things to look into. But yes, there's everything about this. Yes, and so is Paul. And Paul's struggle or Paul's life project is freeing this idea of Jesus's teachings to from the Jewish context into the world of the diaspora as well, into the Gentile world, and the tension that caused, the real tension that one finds when one looks through the studies in closely the Acts of the Apostles. By the way, Luke and Acts are thought to be the same author. This particular gospel, in general, the gospels, four gospels that you've probably heard of. Three are called the synoptic gospels, that is Mark and Matthew and Luke. And they have a lot of the same material overlapping, but in different orders and difference in details. John is quite different, has some of the same material, but is created differently, is the later of the Gospels. When I taught together with Steve Kinney uh, over the last, it's what we did until, I forgot, until the fall. We were both using Bishop Spong's book on how the Gospel of John is not only a Jewish text, a purely Jewish text, but a myth a uh, a mystical Jewish text. Anyway, um, yeah, I think we're going to skip over the next part, which is indicative of if you turn to 46, there, I think most manuscripts have this here, and Mary said, and this is known as a Magnificat of Mary, and but there's also manuscriptural evidence that it's Elizabeth who said this, which is why I thought I left the poem originally, but I think we've had enough there. I think we'll move on to just the 56, if you can continue, Eileen, reading 56 and 57, or actually 56 to the very end of the story.
And Mary remained with her about 3 months and then returned to her home. Now the time came for Elizabeth to give birth, and she bore a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown his great mercy to her, and they rejoiced with her. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him Zechariah after his father. But his mother said, "No, he is to be called John." They said to her, "None of your relatives has this name." Then they began motioning to his father to find out what name he wanted to give him. He asked for a writing tablet and wrote his name is John, and all of them were amazed. Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue freed, and he began to speak, praising God. Fear came from over all their neighbors, and all these things were talked about throughout the entire hill country of Judea. All who heard them pondered them and said, "What then will this child become?" For indeed the hand of the Lord was with him.
Okay.
Want me to continue?
No, I think that we'll take a break now just to sum up this. Uh, we see a strong-willed woman here, right? She's not the only. We do have cases in the TaNaKh where the woman gives even though the man is usually the name giver, the woman does give from time to time, both in the Torah and other places as well. But then he ascertains. So is that a put down? Is that would not the story would we have not liked the story better had she said, and he said something else, and just said no, it's going to be John. Well, yeah, maybe we would have liked that better. But the fact that he follows her lead. What I choose to see here is he's following her lead. And of course, he was told by the angel And that releases him from his punishment of being mute. Um, yeah. Anything else? Okay, so one woman in John's life, John the Baptizer's life, his mother, we don't hear anything about her afterwards, as far as I know. But now we go to two other women in 2/3, but it's really two. Um, uh, Two other women in John the Baptizer's life, or perhaps we should say in his death. Um, so who's going to read? Magdalena, do you want to read a little bit?
Sure.
Okay,
What's
we're in number two, the Herodias, mother and
yes.
daughter. Yeah. So now we're
Uh,
in the gospel according to Mark. There are parallels in the synoptic gospels to this, and also in John, I think, to this scene. But this is the one, this is the juicier one, I think. This is the one I prefer. Go ahead.
For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. 24, 24 Herod uh,
No, with
No,
the
that's the
20,
20.
20 just
For
the verse.
Herod feared John, sorry, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him.
Okay, so now we're in now. Don't even try to follow the name Herod in New Testament literature. I think there are seven different individuals that when I checked, when I was dealing with this last year, seven different individuals who have the name Herod. There's Herod the Great, the one that we know most of, who is from Edomi background, according to rabbinic literature, kind of a convert into Judaism and suspect, but that whole family are kind of puppet kings and puppet rulers of the Romans in the land at that time. But so this is what doesn't matter which Herod this is right now, because the way the story is presented is that this is somebody who is in a position of power. And ironically, Herod's wife is Herodias, right? And we're going to see that's even more complicated in a bit with the name Herodias. But Herodias did not like, why did she not like John the Baptizer? Because he had admonished them on her marriage to him. She was first married to a brother. She married the brother, but that brother didn't die. So it's not the levirate marriage, right? So it's incestual. And John was outspoken about this, and so therefore she wanted to shut him up. I will say that I didn't know this story years ago when the Bible Museum opened in Washington, D.C. I went there with my friend Scotty, who's a museum guy. It just recently opened, and on the top floor there was some. It was really interesting the way things were presented, all sorts of things, and sometimes in a critical way. Even though it's the evangelical Baptist family, it's the Green family of Hobby Lobby that paid for that museum. It belongs to them. It's a private museum, and on the top floor, though, there were two things that were more informal education. One was this village. You could visit this village in the Galilee where actors were walking around offering pita and olives uh, and praising Jesus as this guy who's been walking around doing miracles. That was an interesting informal thing on the top floor. And the other thing was a movie theater. And this was the movie. The movie was about this story, like with a major movie. It was produced with like actors whose faces I recognized, just for them about this story. I said, of all the stories, this is the one you want to tell. Anyway, it begins with this kind of ickiness of an incestual relationship, and therefore she's got it out from him. On the other hand, he's criticized Herod, but he thinks he gives good sermons, right? Okay. So go ahead, Madalena. We're in verse 21.
Is it me again? Yes.
Yeah.
But an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it." And he swore to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom."
Okay, so now we have this birthday party. Some commentators say that birthday parties were frowned upon in the rabbinic circles and Jewish circles. Don't know if that's true. A birthday is not a particularly Jewish thing that people, it is today, but it wasn't traditionally. But in any case, you've got his daughter Herodias. So his wife is Herodias and his daughter is Herodias. And while that is possible that they have the same name, because in the Herod family, they all share the same names, um, as opposed to Yochanan, maybe that's part of the thing, Yochanan is a new name and not Zachariah. It's not from the family. But in any case, uh, others see this just as a textual error, a scribal error, and we'll see what her name is, which is a famous name. We'll see from a different text how we know what else her name could have been. Anyway, does this sound anything reminiscent here of biblical text?
It sounds like
Whatever you ask, I will give you even half my kingdom. Ad chatzia malchut.
Esther.
Esther, exactly, yeah. Hashverosh's words to Esther, yeah. And it's I think it's only in the no, maybe not. It might only be in the Mark text that this phrase is here. Could be in the other parallel text that it's not here, but yeah, yes, yeah, very much so. And I think that the purpose there is to say, oh, look at these two royal women in our history, right? One is this woman who was so modest that she acted the way she did under Hashverosh, and he said, "I'll give you half of the kingdom," and all she wanted was to save her people. And the other is this, what maybe I'm reading into it, but feels like this young this girl who's coming in to dance, which doesn't sound so good, right? It's not even his daughter, it's his stepdaughter. Because yeah, as we'll see afterwards, it's not his daughter, it's his stepdaughter, and she's dancing in front of men. Like, what is that about? And what does she want? So she has the opportunity to ask for half the kingdom. Madalena, go ahead.
Rabbi?
She
Yeah. Sarah, go. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have going back to that line 23 and 22, where here it is, he's perplexed about John, but likes him. It's a little bit like David and Nathan, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Where he knows the wrong that he's done, but they still hang out together.
Kind of a love-hate relationship.
The consciousness of
Yeah,
the
good connection. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Madalena. We're 24.
she went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" She replied, "The head of John the Baptizer." Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter."
Okay, so here's the scene of intimacy. We had the scene beforehand in my juxtaposition of these texts, right? They don't happen in the same book together, but of this intimacy between two women. Here we have a different kind of intimacy between a daughter who's dancing and getting the men excited. Don't think I'm reading into that too much. And going to her mother, quick, mom, what should I ask for? Well, he's giving me the key. He's giving me a credit card. What should I buy? Right? What should I ask for? And of course, what happens? The mother sees a way for her to get a revenge, but what does the daughter do?
She repeats it.
Not exactly. She adds the platter. That's pretty wicked. That's twisted, dude. Okay, man, it's one thing to send him out to the place where you cut off the heads. No, no, no. We want the head here on the platter with the rest of the meal. We want it here at this this feast that we're having where I'm dancing. I mean, she's a sick one. This is and yet so this is the intimacy of this particular woman's conversation. Ria, you're going to reserve the right to you're going to have something interesting to say about this. I know. Do you know this story, Ria?
No, just what I mean, I've seen art
Yeah.
about this, but I really don't know. No.
Do we think it's intentional, the scene here, an intentional reference to Judith and Holofernes? Maybe as a
Uh,
contrast?
I don't know. I mean, you have various women like Deborah, the judge, was actually a soldier, and there were pretty horrible things that happened under her leadership. So, that this is not a new thing exactly.
So
So,
first of all, just to set the record straight, Devorah is a leader and she inspires the army to go, but she herself, there's no deeds, and she sings
right.
about it. But the case that you're referring to, of course, is Yael and Sisra, where she shoves a tent stake into his head. And yes, that is that's the harbinger of Judith. But here the idea that the head is taken, the head is cut off and the head is displayed. It's maybe because we just did it a few weeks ago. It's in on my mind. And I guess this would be maybe an example of in the same way we're familiar with many of the references to the Torah stories or to the Samson stories where it's for sure, right? Perhaps this is a reference to something else that the people that were reading this and hearing this were familiar with, which is the Judith story. Perhaps. There's no way to prove that.
Well, also, I think it also shows, there was this whole thing at this time with the Romans, how much they hated the Romans and how bad the Romans were. Uh, and that might be kind of just to show you the evilness of the Romans themselves, their view of the Romans.
Except for the Herod and family, they're not exactly Romans.
Right, but they're all connected.
They're
Kind of
assimilated Jews in the
Jews,
Roman. Yeah,
right.
yeah, yes, yes, yeah, very
So
much so.
I think there's a lot of the thing with the Rome issue goes on here.
Yeah, they're corrupt. They're yeah, yeah, morally unsound. So, Madalena, please go ahead. 26.
The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in the prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb.
Hey, and there's a lot of traditions about different body parts of John that are venerated in Christian circles that one can find material, but that's not in the text here. As in other words, they did with it sounds like they went without the head. Sounds like they buried him without his head. Um, and just to connect this with Salome, which is a name that you hear more often, is Megan just want to read number 3 for us? This is from Josephus.
But Herodias, their sister, here's another one, was married to Herod Philip, the son of Herod the Great, who was born of Mariamne, the daughter of Simon the high priest, who had a daughter, Salome, after whose birth Herodias took upon her to confound the laws of the country and divorced herself from her husband while he was alive, and was married to Herod Antipas, her husband's brother by the father's side. He was tetrarch of Galilee, but her daughter Salome was married to Philip, the son of Herod, and the tetrarch of Trachonitis. And as he died childless, Aristobulus, the son of Herod, the brother of Agrippa, married her. They had 3 sons, Herod, Agrippa, and Aristobulus. And that was the posterity of Phasaelus and
Salamsio, huh?
Okay. But I think we get Josephus's point here, right?
Yeah,
These people were incestuous.
yeah.
Yeah.
We don't even
Yeah.
know whose brother
And
and
maybe
whose sister.
that's the background of, and so Salome here is the name of the daughter, and not Herodias. But who knows? It's not really so important. What's important is that John has these two women in his life that starts him off before birth. Um, I think text presents as two loving women, both his mother and Mary, why juxtaposed, and then these two horrible women that are at his end. Um, so I think that we and not. I think we won't be doing this fourth. I once I was doing this, and then I came up to the question of the Samaritan woman, which is a famous story. We're not going to do it in this course, but I've given it to you here to read on your own. Interesting as well. Interesting how a woman comes in, has an interaction with Jesus. And this is while anyway.
It seems so different to me, the stories of Judith and the head and the beheading of women and the stake. Yeah. It was done in war, and they were brave enough to try to save the people, whereas these stories are revenge, and which
Yeah.
I don't know the New Testament too well, but I know it, but it's supposed to be love and compassion, and this is sort of
So
creepy. Yeah.
so let's not oversimplify, New Testament versus Old Testament, right? Right. Yeah, that's not what you're doing, but this doesn't take away from the point of love and compassion if we were to take it as a body, because these are the people who are evil people. There's still evil people in the world.
Right.
Right. Okay. And I would say, yes, of course they're different. And I would say, to my mind, it's an intentional comparison to show the contrast. Look what these women do on behalf of the people. Look what these women do on behalf of their depravity. I don't know if you could say on behalf of depravity or in their depravity. That's my take on this. Anything else before we sign off today, folks? Okay, well, thank you for joining us. I think next week I'll try to tackle on what's known as the Three Mary Challenge, the Three Marys. And we'll try to make a little bit of sense out of it. But please remember, everything we do here is just a drop in the bucket. It's the beginning of a conversation that you may or may not have with the texts that are sacred to so many people around us here, living in the United States and across the globe. And it's relatively easy to do this as opposed to looking at texts from the Quran or from Hindu literature or even Buddhist literature, which are a little, they're not as entertaining. This is narrative prose. Even some of it was poetry. It's far easier, and it's very close to our own traditions. But I think this is an important endeavor for all of us to further the goal of pluralism, of openness. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.